Hello, everyone. My name is Brent Thoman with Core Vision Financial Group, and today we're going to talk about employer-sponsored retirement plans with Brett Rice. Brett, can you take a second and tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Brent. Real excited to be here today on the other side of the microphone today, though, not doing the interviewing today, answering the questions and talking about the subject matter. And today we're going to be talking about employer plans, which I've participated in my entire life. So I'm pretty familiar with them on a participant side, and learning a lot about how they work. But I've lived in Shelbyville almost my entire life. All but about 3 years of my life have been spent here in Shelby County. Been working here at Core Vision for the last couple of years. Just real excited to talk about this today. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for that, Brett. So let's get into the employer-sponsored plans. Tell us a little bit about why should we participate in an employer-sponsored plan?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons why somebody should participate in an employer plan, and I think one of the number one items or reasons why you should participate in them is because it's super easy to participate in them, right? They can make that to where it comes right out of your check before you get it deposited into your account, so then it's not like you're trying to account for it after that. The ease is I think the biggest factor of participating in it. In general, there are a lot of specifics of certain plans that make them more attractive to participate in than others, but I think in general it's the ease of participating in one. Also, there are some tax advantages of currently you could reduce your tax. You can reduce your taxable income by having that taken out pre-tax. So then you're tax deferring that money to not be taxed until you take it out in retirement. So, there potentially are some advantages to doing that as well.
Well, that's very interesting, Brett. One thing I would like to ask is why would I want to start, and does starting early help me out versus starting later and maybe putting more money in?
One of the biggest impacts you can have on your retirement savings is getting started early. The earlier you get started and the longer your money has to compound, it can have a profound effect on your retirement savings. Having an additional 5 or 10 years to compound, can significantly increase your retirement assets. So somebody starting in their 20s versus somebody starting in their 30s, the person who starts in their 20s can, even at a smaller contribution rate, can have a much larger retirement savings just based upon the number of years that they've been in there and the compounding that goes on. So compounding interest is a very interesting thing. I believe it was Albert Einstein said it's the eighth wonder of the world, just because talk 35, 40 years down the road, the amount of compounding that goes on, just has such a huge effect on the principal amount.
That's an interesting idea. That is one of the few things I think some people don't understand as well, is the earlier you start, the less you do have to put in. I've heard in my 21 years is, well, I'll wait till I'm 30 some when I've got making a little bit more money, and I'll put in 1,000 instead of 200. That person who put the 200 in their early 20s will never be caught by the person who puts in that $1,000. It's amazing what compounding interest is, and you are correct about the Albert Einstein. It can be the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah, Brent. One of the things I think that people need to make sure they're prioritizing with their retirement saving, goes along with the saying of paying yourself first, right? Like one of the things they say is when you get your check, the first thing you're supposed to do is take your savings out, and then you pay from the rest. Well, your retirement savings should be done in the same manner. So that's why participating in an employer plan where they take that out before you get that money, it just makes it so simple and easy to pay yourself first that percentage that you're going to contribute.
Brett, can you explain to me what an actual employer-sponsored retirement plan is, please?
Yeah, Brent. Traditionally, it's it's offered as a benefit from an employer. You know, they're saying, hey, one of the benefits we offer at this company is you're able to participate in our retirement program. A lot of times those will include an employer match. There's going to be, options as far as pre-tax and Roth options. There's going to be a lot of different options in there that, it's being presented as it's a benefit of working at that company.
That's some good information, Brett. Let me talk a little bit about, or ask you a question about the different types of retirement options you have. We've always had the traditional where you were talking about the pre-tax, and it's tax deferred while you're working, and then when you go to take it out, you're taxed as ordinary income at this current time. Here recently, we've had the Roth 401k. We've had the Roth IRA in the recent history also, but Roth 401k seems to be becoming more prevalent. Can you talk a little bit about the two, a little bit more about the different ways they're taxed and what might be the advantage of one versus the other?
Sure, Brent. Those are great topics that we, probably want to make sure we cover here so people understand, inside these employer plans, they do have a lot of options. The investment options are going to be a little bit different, for each employer and the type of plan, and, 401k, 403bs, 457s, deferred comp plans, all of these different options that, these different companies, are going to be able to offer their employees. So when you look at it traditionally in a 401k, historically those have all been pre-tax. So the money comes out before your tax is calculated on your pay. So then what that requires is when you take that money out in retirement, you need to pay that income tax on it then. And that's where people, say that that's the tax deferred portion of your retirement savings, right? So then what you're hoping for is the tax you're paying today is going to be higher than the tax you're going to pay in retirement. So then you're actually saving yourself money. So not only is your money compounding over that time while you're working, when you go to use it in retirement, it's going to come out with a lower taxable rate. Now, with a Roth, it's different. The contribution amount comes out after it's been taxed. So now that your principal is post-tax, it then in a retirement account will grow tax-free. So in retirement, when you go to take that money out, the tax has already been paid on it, and you don't have any taxable obligation on it. And there are multiple other kinds of different investment options in retirement plans, and specifically, we're talking about 401ks really, because that's most commonly what people are offered as an employee benefit. So you're talking, mutual funds, ETFs, target date funds. Those are kind of the basics that they normally are the building blocks that a lot of retirement plans are built on. So let's talk about these real quick. Target date funds is something that a lot of people are unfamiliar with. Traditionally, those will have like a retirement date, 2050, 2055, 2060, 2065. And what that is that fund will have a glide path that as it gets closer to your retirement date, it becomes more conservative in its investments and is increasing its fixed income holdings and reducing its equity holdings as it gets to that target date. So that way, 5 years before you're about to retire, a massive drawback in the market, you wouldn't be setting at 80% equity and 20% fixed income. You'd be much closer to, 60-40, 50-50, some type of equity fixed index breakdown that is going to help, change the impact that drawdown has on you compared to being 100% equities or 80% equities. There are multiple types of target date funds. There's just two. There's to and through. One that its glide path stops at that date, and then it stays the same throughout your retirement. And then there's through, which once it hits the retirement date, it continues to change that investment breakdown, the percentage of fixed income versus the percentage of equities. So in these employer plans, a lot of times they're going to have default investments that when you register for them, they're going to tell you that you need to pick these, and if you don't pick them, then these are going to be the investments that you're put in. Along with, there's an auto enroll function a lot of times that companies are putting in there that automatically starts you at 2, 3, 4, 5% contribution, and then you have to go in and change that. So what that is it's an attempt to, kickstart your retirement program by saying you're automatically going to be participating in this unless you go in and say, I do not want to participate in that. So those are just some of the options, you're going to see when you're looking at getting involved in your employer plan, and, just some of the basics of it. When you start talking about what's the investments in there, you start talking about what's an ETF, what's a mutual fund, what's a target date fund, and those things. Those are the things you need to make sure that you're comfortable with understanding what they are. So when you're like, oh, I own mutual funds, you understand what a mutual fund is, or you understand what an ETF is, and a target date fund. You understand that how a target date how a glide path for a target date fund works, as it's moving towards your retirement date.
Brett, can you expand a little bit about the company's match and how that works and what the advantage is for each and every person?
Yeah, so one of the big benefits of participating in an employer plan is some employers will offer a match. So what they're going to say is that they'll match the funds that you put in the retirement program up to a certain percentage. What they're going to say is, traditionally they'll say, oh, we're going to match dollar for dollar, say to 3%, and then from 3 to 6% that you put in, we're going to match 50%. So what that does, it allows you to, multiply your contribution by that matching, and, increase your annual savings and your lifetime savings towards your retirement plan. And so, a lot of times when we're talking to people about, what their investments are and what they're doing, they'll talk about or ask the question, well, how much should I be contributing to my my work retirement plan? And sometimes we're going to tell them that depends upon what that match is. So when people ask us the question, how much should they be contributing to their retirement plan? There's a lot of factors that go into answering that question. But one of them is, well, what's your employer match? We want to make sure you're maxing that out, so you're getting as much of that, what we'll call free money, as you possibly can, as long as that, it fits within your budget, your money goals, and all of that thing, right? Because all of those need to be taken into account. I don't want to say, well, you should put in 6% to get the employer match. Well, if that doesn't leave you enough money to pay your bills, then you know what I mean? That doesn't make sense. So what we want to make sure is that number works with your budget, also works towards getting you to your retirement goals. I mean, right? We don't want to tell you to put in 4% because that's all the company matches, but at the same time, that's not going to get you to your retirement goal. So answering that question of how much money should I be contributing, it's not as cut and dry as, oh, you should be, contributing as much to get your employer match, because that may not get you to your retirement goal, right? It may not give you enough money in income in retirement. It may not fit in your budget. I mean, it may not make sense based upon, potentially some of the investments that are in those accounts. I mean, there's a lot of factors that need to be taken into account there when you're talking about how that works. So recently, a lot of employer plans have included an auto enrollment. I touched on that briefly earlier, talking about how that works. They put you in it automatically, and then you have to take yourself out. Well, several of them now are including auto escalation clauses. So when it comes enrollment time, they automatically, if you have it at 3%, it'll automatically bump it up to 4%. And then you have to go in and reduce that if that's what you wanted to do. So there are a lot of changes coming around on retirement plans that are allowing for, some of those, the auto enrollment, the auto escalation, in an effort to help people save more money for retirement. So those are a couple items about why I think it's important to participate in your employer plan, which I think in general, the idea is great. I mean, it's a way to introduce people to investing. It's a way to get people comfortable with investing, because it's a scary thing. And when you talk to people, they're very concerned about putting their money in the market because, right, people feel like they don't understand it. They don't have any control over it. And those are all things that are very understandable, right? So getting involved in a program like an employer plan gives you the ability to control the contributions and watch that over time, and then start to understand, hey, this is how this works. You get comfortable with those investments, and then that helps you become a better investor and more involved in your retirement savings.
One thing, Brett, I think can be overlooked at times with the retirement plans for the employees is it could be their first or second largest asset they own. Right. The other one might be in their house. So this is why it's very important, starting early, to make this one of your largest assets. You kind of talked about that already, expanded on that, so I won't go any farther. But my one question is, what if you leave work or retire? What are some options you have with your retirement plan after this happens?
Yeah, that's very important, Brent. Historically, like our grandparents and, potentially even our parents may have only had one or two jobs their entire life. They may have, my grandparents worked at the same place for 40 plus years. I mean, that was the only job they ever had. I mean, those days you don't find that a whole lot. There's still people that, get one job out of high school and stay there forever. Definitely there are people out there. But in general, especially with the younger crowd, people are already, before they get into their career, have already had, 3 or 4 jobs. So a big deal for people is making sure that you keep control of that money, right? Because that money belongs to you. So one thing that we talk to people about is educating them on their options, right? When you leave one company and you go to another company, you want to be able to make sure you're still in control of those funds. Because once you're no longer employed with that company, you're not participating in their plan. So then, you start playing by a different set of rules with your money invested there. So one of the things that we make sure people understand is what generally are your options when you leave a company. You can roll it over to the new company you're working for, as long as their plan allows rollovers into the plan. You can roll it into a traditional IRA. You can roll it into a Roth IRA. You could cash it out. Now, there are penalties and rules that have to be followed for that, right? If it's pre-tax, you got to pay tax. You get under the age of 59 and a half, you're going to pay a penalty. I mean, there are definitely rules with all of these. I mean, even with rolling it into an IRA, there are rules that say you have a certain time limit from withdrawal to, contribution on a new IRA. There are a bunch of rules that go along with that. But, that's one of the things that we're here for, is to help educate people on what all of those options are. How do they proceed with those options, and how do they figure that out? Another time when somebody would leave a company, maybe isn't to go to another company, but maybe to retire, right? Eventually all of us are, walking towards this goal of retiring. So, there are options when you go to retire on what happens to the funds that you've saved up into your retirement account and how those are handled. And they're kind of, along the same steps. Do you roll it into an IRA? Do you move it into a Roth? Do you move it to a local advisor that you know? I mean, you have a lot of options. Do you cash it out? It's an option. Probably not the premier option, I wouldn't say, taking the whole thing out in a lump sum. So, I mean, there are definitely options when you go to retire. leave it where it's at and, enroll in one of their programs for them to help you figure out, what your distributions need to be and what you need to, if you need to change your investments to anything. There's so many factors that go into all of this when you're talking about what's your lifestyle goals and what your bills are going to be in retirement and what your other fixed incomes are, whether, you're going to get a Social Security, whether you have a pension, whether you have all of these other factors that go into that help you try and decide how much you need to withdraw out of your retirement plan.
Again, we want to thank Brett Rice with Core Vision Financial Group. And my name again is Brent Thum with Core Vision Financial Group. If you have any questions, please contact us. Information will be at the end of this video. Thank you.